It is the 41st millennium. For more than 100 centuries, the Emperor has sat immobile on the golden throne of Earth. He is the master of mankind by the will of the gods, and master of 1,000,000 worlds by the might of his inexhaustible armies. He is a rotting carcass, writhing invisibly with power from the dark age of technology. He is the carrion lord of the Imperium, for whom 1,000 souls are sacrificed every day, so that he may never truly die. Yet, even in his deathless state, the Emperor continues his eternal vigilance. Mighty battle fleets across the demon-infested miasma of the warp, the only route between distant stars, their way lit by the Astronomicon, the psychic manifestation of the Emperor's will. Vast armies give battle in his name on uncounted worlds. Greatest amongst his soldiers are the Adeptus Astartes, the Space Marines, bioengineered super warriors. Their comrades in arms are Legion, the Imperial Guard, and countless planetary defense forces, the ever-vigilant Inquisition, and the tech priests of the Adeptus Mechanicus, to name only a few. But for all their multitudes, they are barely enough to hold off the ever-present threat from aliens, heretics, mutants, and worse. To be a man in such times is to be one amongst untold billions. It is to live in the cruelest and most bloody regime imaginable. These are the tales of those times. Forget the power of technology and science, for so much has been forgotten, never to be relearned. Forget the promise of progress and understanding, for in the Grimdark Future, there is only war. There is no peace amongst the stars, only an eternity of carnage and slaughter, and the laughter of thirsting gods.
The past is a mirror to the future, or so a friend once said to me. I did not believe it then. I do now. The past walks with us. Its face is the face of all those we have hated, all we have loved, all we have failed. They say that to be an agent of the God Emperor's Inquisition is to see the true horror of the universe and still have the will to prevail. As with all things, there is another face to the truth. I have looked on the terrors of the universe and cast them down. I have judged billions and forgiven some. I have known victory and touched defeat. And the lesson that all my years as an Inquisitor has taught me is that it is not enough to prevail. We have to endure the poison of history. We have to survive our own sins. My name is Gregor Eisenhorn. I am 148 years old, still in my prime by Imperial standards, and those of the Inquisition. All my life, I've had a reputation for being cold, unfeeling. Some have called me heartless, ruthless, even cruel. I am not, and I am. I am not beyond emotional response or compassion, but I possess, and my masters count this as perhaps my paramount virtue, a singular force of will. Throughout my career it has served me well to draw on this facility and steel myself, unflinching at all that this wretched galaxy can throw at me. To feel pain or fear or grief is to allow myself a luxury I cannot afford. As a member of His High Majesty the God Emperor's Inquisition, I find my philosophy questioning at this time. To the outside galaxy, members of our order appear much alike. An Inquisitor is an Inquisitor, a being of fear and persecution. It surprises many that internally, we are riven with clashing ideologies. To express it in simple terms, some Inquisitors are Puritans and some are radicals. Puritans believe and enforce the traditional station of the Inquisition, working to purge our galactic community of any criminal or malevolent element. The triumvirate of evil: alien, mutant, and demon. Anything that clashes with the pure rule of mankind, the preachings of the Ministorum and the letter of imperial law, is subject to a Puritan Inquisitor's attention. Hardline, traditional, merciless. That is the Puritan way. Radicals believe that any methods are allowable if they accomplish the inquisitorial task. I hunt Quixos, a fallen member of my order, one who uses forbidden resources, such as the warp itself, as weapons against the enemies of mankind, and even the Imperium itself. I was once a Puritan by calling, and an Amalathian by choice. The ferociously strict ways of the monodominant philosophy no longer entices me. There is precious little subtlety in their ways, and thus it is not for me. Amalathians take our name from the conclave at Mount Amalath. Our endeavor is to maintain the status quo of the Imperium, and we work to identify and destroy any persons or agencies that might destabilize the power of the Imperium from without or within. They believe in strength through unity. Change is the greatest enemy. They believe the God Emperor has a divine plan, and work to sustain the Imperium in stability until that plan is made known. We have deplored factions and infighting, and yet I have found myself declared Diabolus Extremis. In the eyes of the God Emperor's Holy Inquisition, I am a heretic. The massacre at Thracian Primaris, the mutilation of my greatest pupil, Gideon Ravener, and the death of millions has been laid at my feet. I am cut off from the resources that I desperately need to battle Quixos and his demon hosts, hiding away aboard the rogue trader Tobias Maxilla's ship. So you have me then, pictured. Gregor Eisenhorn, rogue, on the run, over a century old. I am not the Puritan I once was. I am not sure how to define myself, but I am resolute. I have already told you of my force of will, and you will have noticed my prowess with a blade. What else is there? I killed the heretic Iclone. I have triumphed over a corrupted House Glaw. I burned the Ceruthi and 56 Ezar of its chaos taint. Come, and let me show you how I will fight Quixos. Thorn wishes multifarious changelings, rapturous beasts below. The 20th day of 10th month, 340 M41. I will record this thought now, because I feel I must. For all that Pontius Glaw was, for all that came later, I cannot shake my bond to him, though I try. There, in the cell on Sin Chair, and essentially before in the dim hold of the Ascen, we had spoken together for hundreds of hours. I had no doubt that he was an unforgivably evil thing, and that he would have killed me in a second during those times, had he been allowed the chance. But he was a being of extraordinary intellect, wit and learning, admirable in so many ways, strange ways. But for that talk, back on that spring day, on Quenthis, his life may have been different. And if it had been different, and had we met, we would have been the greatest of friends. Bequin told me not to worry about Fishik. The conversations between me and Pontius Glaw had upset him. He had broken me out of prison, saved my life from execution because he knew I would never turn. But the fact that I skirted the line here made him worry. I had to. I needed this power and knowledge in order to combat Quixos and his demon hosts. Glaw was right. Many of my ilk had crossed a line, some unknowingly, and if I was honest, the thought gave me fear. I am an Amalathian. Perhaps not the Puritan I was in my youth, but I had others to keep me from crossing the line. Harlan Nail strode to stand beside me. You fight dirty sometimes, don't you, Harlan? He looked at me quizzically and scratched his shaved scalp. Not sure I know what you mean, boss, he said. All those years, bounty hunting, and I've seen you fight, remember? Sometimes you have to break the rules to win, I said. I suppose so, he replied. When all is said and done, you use whatever works. I'm not proud of some of my more ruthless moments, but they're necessary. I've always been of the opinion that fair play is overrated. That bastard trying to skin you won't be playing fair, that's for sure. You do what you have to do. The end justifies the means, I said slowly. He raised his eyebrows and laughed. Now that's different. That kind of thinking gets a man in trouble. There are some means that no end will ever justify, but fighting dirty, occasionally, is no such bad thing. Neither's breaking the rules, provided you remember one thing, which is, I said, you have to understand the rules in the first place if you're going to break them. I drew Barbarisator. With information gathered over the weeks of interrogation, I combined my knowledge with Glaw's, melding it with Bure's expertise to reforge the weapon into a master-crafted artifact. Priceless materials, even a fragment of the dormant cleanse lith, and runes now etched into its surface. I would owe Clan Eswe-Swendir for this weapon, as I already owed them for Ariod's life. I should have returned it to their care, for it was part of their clan legacy and Usuril, or living story. It was mine to safeguard, not to take, and certainly not to deface this way, but face to face with profanity. At Khazar Gesh, I had learned that pentagrammatic words worked against demon hosts. All that was left was the need of a saint's blessing. 341 M41 we departed. I wished Bure well, instructing him to honour my word and to give Glaw a servitor body. I couldn't express my gratitude that Bure deserved, especially for listening to my story and choosing to believe me. I didn't know how much I needed that validation until I had it. I, Amos, Bequin, Medea, Nail, Fishig, Injabel and Maxilla dined as we celebrated the passing of a new year. It would be months or even years before we could all sit in a room together again, for each possessed a formal writ we would spread to those we could trust, a formal disavowal of Quixos and the request for aid, all the while hiding from Inquisitor Ozma and most of the Inquisition. I was somber for days as each split off. Orbal Infanta, Ecclesiarchal World, Saint Ezra, who had been martyred in 670 M40, was the patron saint of undertaking and setting forth, for which I took to be appropriate. His city was a shimmering growth of steel, glass and stone rising from the sun-cut plains of the Midwest. According to the guide slates, all water was pumped in from the western coast, along vast pipelines 2,000 kilometers long. I was dressed in black leather head to toe, a yellow sash as per tradition covering my chest. I knelt inside the cathedral grounds before a priest, the blessings of Saint Ezra gifted to Barbarisator. I made to lead through the swarming mass of pilgrims until a bolt shell flew beside me. I dashed to cover as blood sprayed across the tiles, Barbarisator dropping from my grip. I looked up to see a figure I recognized, donned in bronze gleaming powered armor, a figure I had last seen almost claim my life in the warrens of Leth 11 when poison coursed through my blood. Witchfinder Tantalid. He disengaged his mirror shield and gazed down at me. You are an accursed heretic, Eisenhorn, and that fact is now proven beyond doubt by the Carta issued for you. In the name of the Ministorum of Mankind, I claim your life. Tantalid holstered his bolt pistol and drew his ancient chainsword, Theophantus, intent on delivering formal execution with the holy weapon. I fired my las pistol, powering shot after shot at him, driving him backwards. I got in close, only to be sent flying into scaffolding on a lower level, the air stolen from my lungs. 2 acolytes of Tantalid drew in to finish me as I rose. I didn't need the will. I was already angry. The revelations of Glaw's knowledge had robbed me of solid sleep for 4 months. I viciously cut them both down, after disarming and running them through with their own weapons. It would only come to me later. The blood I was spilling was fanatical, but loyal Imperial blood. Another crime to be laid at Quixos's feet. Tantalid rounded on me. Each swing almost bisected me, and eventually he would. From above, an object flew into view, tossed by Medea, the Carthaian blade. Barbarisator purred in my grip as I came up, the runes ablaze with vengeful light. Tantalid realized that the nature of the battle had suddenly changed. I saw it in his eyes. My first swing severed his wrist, cutting clean through the powered armored cuff, dropping his hand to the floor. Still clutching the smoking bolt gun, my second met Theothantus and destroyed it, spraying disintegrating chain teeth and machine parts into the air. My third cut Witchfinder Tantalid in two, from the left shoulder to the groin. Neither half of him made a sound as they fell apart onto the cathedral floor. I had despised the man. His personal vendetta against me over decades was truly his downfall. But it was his words, his sanctioned killing of heretic Gregor Eisenhorn, that wounded my soul. 343 M41, Thessalon, near Hesperus in the Helican subsector. Despite all the precautions, I was taking my life in my hands. I was presenting myself, voluntarily, to 4 members of the Inquisition. I was trusting that my previous friendships and allegiances with them would count for more than the accusations Ozma had laid at my feet. These 4 were the only 4 who had responded, out of the original 20 communiques. Nail had vetted each one, but there was still a very real chance that any or all of them had attended simply to execute the declared heretic Gregor Eisenhorn. I greeted Amos, Nail, Inchabel, Beckwin, and Fishig. I nodded to my oldest friend, Titus Endor, as I entered the room. To the side sat the ancient Commodus Voke, never a friend, but an ally to me since the Necrotuke affair. I wasn't sure if it was his faith in my character, or a chance to right the wrong of Thracian Primaris' massacre, that had brought him here. He unjustly blamed himself as the capturer of the Alpha-level Psychus. To his left stood a tall, confident man I didn't recognize. His domed head was shaved, but there was a violet glint in his eyes that told me he was Cadian, Inquisitor Raum Gruman, a close ally of General Inquisitor Neve. She had helped me break out from that Cadian prison, and likely suffers the ire of Ozma as we spoke. The identity of the 4th and final guest took me aback. He was clad in polished battleware plating that looked custom-made and exorbitantly expensive. With gauntleted hands, he lifted the scowling hound skull helmet off his head. Inquisitor Massissimo Ricci, of Helican Ordo Xenos. He was hardly an old friend, but I knew him well, and I knew his presence meant that I had Lord Inquisitor Rorken's support. All Ordos of the God Emperor's Inquisition were present, as Beckwin stepped forward to speak. Over hours we outlined every piece of intel, from Conrad Molitor and 56 Izar, to Lyco and the massacre at Thracian Primaris, the demon hosts on Cadia. Beckwin was the last standing. As you can see from the files of data marked Alpha, Quixos certainly visited the planet Manganor almost 200 years ago, and became involved with a cartel of trade interests and noble families known as the Mythic Path. The Path was a network which already utilized prohibited and forbidden law and technologies. Quixos could have closed them down and burned them. It is clear he did not. Instead, he fed and supported them. He nurtured them until they became a power base for his individual empire of dark belief. No longer a cartel, but a cult of Quixos. See below that I have traced massive stone-cutting orders to the limit world of Cerberus, which lies galactically south of Terra. The Masonic guilds of Cerberus are famously secretive about their contacts. They provide an inert, obsidian-like black glass stone called cerbite, a beautiful substance that is in high demand right across the Imperium. Cerbite is, as far as reckoning goes, as close to the material used on Cadia for the pylons as it is possible to get. As I have said, the Masonic guilds are close about their contacts, but there is little hiding transportation of a massive copy of one of those pylons by shipping guild bulk lifter, 3/4 of a kilometer long and 1/4 square. Quixos has ordered the manufacture of a perfect copy of the Cadian pylons, and has had it shipped to Farnus Beta. If you have ever trusted my advice, trust this now. Quixos is on Farnus, and if you're going to stop him, it must be now. Your devoted friend and pupil, Gideon Ravener, crippled as he was, He had found this insight, which totally altered our plan of attack, along with 20 scrolls of demonic protection. I was speechless. I felt almost tearful. I was overjoyed that he lived, and even more so that his mind was still intact. Titus Endor, Commodus Vogue, Raum Grumman, and Massimo Ricci stood, all declaring their unwavering support and belief in my cause. Inquisitor Quixos was a heretic, and the Inquisition demanded vengeance. Even now I cannot express the weight I felt lift from my shoulders. A burden I had carried since Cadia, the self-doubt and the words of Pontius. My allies' validation meant more than words could express. Farnus Beta, 343, M41. Thorn desires illumination. Rapturous beast below. A false dawn rose as the bombardments fell upon the mountain facility. We had all anticipated Quixos would have fast psychic defenses. He had, after all, been collecting psyches like a Charadon, and it seemed likely that active psychic assault would be a key element of his resistance, perhaps even more significant than his demon hosts. In 2 groups, my entire distaff of untouchables, some 50 individuals all told, had moved in alongside the first ground troop advances. Bequin, guarded by Nail and 12 of my warrior staff, led one group. Fishig and a dozen more fighters led the other. The distaff had never been used on such a scale before, but it proved to be the weapon I had always suspected it to be. We had a small army, filled with each Inquisitor's staff, ranging from ex-Cadian Kazakin to Thracian spec ops, that flooded these facilities. Maxilla's SN had never been so full. We were met by Quixos' own army of cultists, loyal only to him. I could see it in Endor's expression. Despite all the strength we were mustering, we still faced hard resistance. We plunged deeper, traveling for hours as we cut down pockets of resistance. We raced into a massive chamber, half filled with veiling smoke. Green, unnatural flames were licking up the walls, surrounded by over 50 bodies, most of them Imperial Guard. Commodus Vogue was standing his ground against profanity. The ancient Inquisitor wielded his psychic might, but was on the verge of breaking. As I and Endor rushed forward, I tried to join my will to Vogue's, until Cherubael hovered before me. "Gregor," it said, "you've come so far. I knew you had it in you." I held up my new rune staff in front of me. The green marble scroll of demonic protection that Ravenor had sent had already been reduced to a shattered remnant by the force of Cherubael's opening attack. "I've waited for this moment for such a long time," said the demon host. "Remember on Echan, I said you'd have to make things up to me. Well, this is the time. Now. This is the moment that everything has been about. The one I have seen coming since our paths first crossed. Destinies, our destinies, intertwined. Remember that." "How could I forget?" I spat. "You claim to have been using me all along, guiding me, even protecting me. I watched you kill Lyko and Echan, so that I would live. For this moment? Why?" Cherubael smiled. "And the warp is in you, as it is in me. You see time from all angles. You see what will be and what will come. What someone here will do in a century or 2. What someone there has done 1,000 years in the past. You see the possibilities. Riddles. That's all you ever speak," I shouted back, parrying his fury of attacks. "No more riddles, Eisenhorn. From the first moment I met you, I saw you were the only one. The only one with the tenacity, the skill and the opportunity to give me what I want. What I want most of all. I saw that if I kept you safe, you would come and give me that most precious thing here on this world at this hour. I would never help a demon like you." Cherubael grinned, blank-eyed and utterly serious. "Then destroy me, if you can." I raised my rune staff, one crafted from the knowledge taken from Pontius Glaw. The runes glowed hot, and I thrust a blast of psychic potential far beyond my own strength. But Cherubael didn't move. Smiling, he allowed himself to burst and unravel. I saw into its mind. I saw the years of enslavement it had endured at Quixos' hands, the torments of its binding, the great, forbidden text of the Malus Codicium, whose arcane knowledge Quixos had used to create his demon hosts. This was our relationship, mine and Cherubael. Why he could have killed me a dozen times over. He saw a path only I could walk, a path to give him his freedom. I felt nothing but disgust then. I rallied back to the other fight. I ran past the wounded forms of Cherubael and Endor, stepping up to the hovering form of profanity, the corpse of Commodus Voke underneath it. Never my friend, but Voke had been an ally where others had turned their back. The ancient Inquisitor had finally earned his rest, and I would avenge him. The smiling demon host charged at me. At Khazar Geth, you told me to make my weapons sounder next time, monster, I howled, and impaled his charging form on the steel pole of my rune staff. Is this sound enough? Profanity screamed and exploded, blowing me off my feet. I didn't think I'd banished it. I think I obliterated its essence forever. I got to my feet, making my way to Titus Endor. I made to lift his wounded form when I saw it, a rosette of Ordos Malleus. He had changed Ordos. Since when? I saw the look of shame in his eyes. He spluttered, speaking of how he was forced by Ozma, forced into spying on me, even since Thracian Primaris. No doubt his presence here was no alliance, but an impending execution on me. I ordered the stunned Cherubael to take my oldest friend away. His screams of how he was protecting me. He was blackmailed. How he had given nothing of value, but it fell on deaf ears, for my rage was too great. I plunged in deeper, far too aware of how little men and firepower we had left. I pushed for 3 hours, until reuniting with the other inquisitorial assassination force. Ricci was weak from a blade wound, and all of his bodyguards were dead. Grumman had just 2 Kazakin left with him, both of them armed with las rifles. I peered into the inner sanctum chamber. Rogue psychers hung like ornaments around the walls. One of them, I had no doubt, was a Charadon. The place was a hellscape, the designs of a mad and broken mind. I was too slow to see what happened next. Innocently, Ricci was split open down the length of his spine, as he was still in the process of falling on his face, choking on his own blood. One of the Kazakin was severed at the waist and toppled in halves, his gun firing spasmodically. The other Kazakin folded up around the impaling thrust of a long, dark blade, spontaneously combusting from the belly out. Grumman pushed me out of the way as a devastating blur turned again. He fired his las pistol at it 3 times. The blur moved, snapping round faster than my eyes could follow. The long, dark blade the blur was wielding deflected each crackling shot. Grumman's head left his shoulders. Quixos, the arch-heretic, the renegade, the unforgivable radical, whirled on me before Grumman's butchered body had even started to slump. I had one fleeting glimpse of the long demon sword. Karnagar. It was gnarled and knotted and thick with abominable runes and irregular claw serrations. That is all I saw as it came whistling towards my face. I drew Barbarasata and began to trade blows. Quixos was far from the monster in my mind, yet his image was one of disgust. His ancient face was misshapen, a pustular horror. Rudimentary antlers bulged from his brow. His skin was dark like granite. Wheezing augmetic cables and implants bulged at his throat. And under the dirty head cloth he wore, his eyes were shining balls of blood. Heretic! Slave of chaos! He battered into my mind. He was insane. He was exactly what Pontius Glaw had described, the crossing of the line to the state of insanity. The pylons of Kadir pacify the warp, he spat. By amplifying them using extreme psychers, they could be made into a weapon to destroy the warp, a weapon to collapse the Eye of Terror in upon itself, and kill half a segment of my thought. And that was a price he was willing to pay. This was where radicalism led. You have to understand the rules in the first place, if you're going to break them. And there was no rule Quixos wouldn't break, even swimming in the corruption of chaos itself. I couldn't let myself become this. We parted. Barbarasata's rune edge glowed with heat as I dived in for a Sa'ahat Ud, a slice to the heart. Carnagar slammed down and broke my blade, but I stepped in with an all care and rammed my broken half into his chest. "Heretic," he wheezed out as he fell into a heap on the floor. Unknowingly, for over a century I had chased Quixos's work. St. Hubris, House Glaw, 56 Ezar, Cherubael, Thracian Primaris, Cadia, and now here. And yet I felt no relief flood me. That came later, with a full inquisitional pardon. Only I and Titus Endor of the Inquisition survived. The others were given full honours burials. Commodus Voke, most of all, I would miss. Cherubael left my service. There would always be a place for him in my staff. But I would be there when he would attain the full rank of Inquisitor. Amos, Bequin, Nail, Medea, Fishik and my distaff returned with me to our Gudrun estate in the latter half of 343 M41. I retreated down into my deepest chambers, to a warded vault only I knew existed. Why? My prisoner spat, squirming against its chains. Because I have power over you, where once you had power over me. You used me. You orchestrated my life. You moved me like a regicide piece to the place where I best serve your desires. Now that is reversed. It thrashed against its chains and shackles, but it was still too weak from the ordeals of the snaring entrapment. "Damn you," it whispered, falling limp. "Understand me," I said. "I would never help a thing like you, but you tricked me into doing so and almost got away with it. That is why I have done this. That is why I have expended the considerable time and effort involved in raising you, snaring you and binding you. This is a lesson. I will never, ever allow my actions or my life to benefit the arch-enemy. You said that from the outset. You knew I was the one who would free you from Quixos's service. It is a shame you failed to see what I might do to you instead." "Damn you!" The voice was louder. "There will be a time, Cherubael, demon thing, when you will wish with all your putrid soul to be Quixos's plaything again." I left the demon host in there, locked away in the deepest hole I possessed. I strode up to my open vault within my study and placed the Malus Codicium inside. You have to understand the rules in the first place if you're going to break them. Quixos had taught me the line. I wondered then if faced with the same dilemma I was given a century before, the choice of whether to keep or destroy the Ceruthian Necrotuk, would Gregor Eisenhorn of today make the same choice? Am I still the Puritan I once was? Midas Betancourt had once, during a late night of drinking, and Galavian rules regicide said, "Why do they do it? The radicals, I mean. Don't they understand that even getting close to the warp is suicide?" I thought differently now. Sometimes you have to break the rules to win. Rosethorn by Flamelight Crescent, Dura, 386 M41. She was killed. I lay on the ground, weeping and gasping. The rune staff, steaming, had landed on the stone with a clang. My plan had failed dismally and completely. "Elizabeth?" I asked softly, looking to where she lay. Fishik and Nail were huddled over her. Nail looked back at me and shook his head. "No," I said, as I stepped forward. "Not Elizabeth. Not her. After all this time, she's hurt bad, boss," Nail had said. "I'll try to make her comfortable." But the tread of Cruel Vault echoed outside. I staggered towards Bequin. She looked so still, so broken. I had no ideas. I was only partially conscious. I had Barbarisator in my fist and was running for the door. I think I meant to go out and face the Titan with my sword. That's how far gone I was. One man with a sword, intent on facing down a battle Titan. Before I could reach the door, I heard the scream of down jets and the chatter of cannon fire. I didn't have to look out to know it was my gun cutter. Damn Medea Betancourt. Fade Thuring had been left to fester in power too long. Nearly a century before, he had been a low-level acolyte of a greater cult, one who had killed my closest friend, Midas Betancourt, Medea's father. I am an Inquisitor. Petty vengeance was far below the priorities the role demanded of me. But when the opportunity presented itself upon Dura, I and my staff seized upon it. Medea had never met her father. Her dark skin and features were all wrapped up under her father's coat, and made her a spitting image of him. "Kill the bastard," she had said to me, and I agreed. I departed an inquisitorial trial being held in the vicinity. My staff, who had expanded in the decades since the Quixos conspiracy, were bolstered by Inquisitor Rassi, a good friend. We stormed the island facility, housing an abandoned Mechanicus plant, only for a behemoth of legend to emerge, with a sound that gripped me in a primal fear. Its name was Cruelvolt. It weighed 2,500 tons, and stood 60 meters tall. Like all the great warlord-class battle titans, it was a biped, almost humanoid in proportions, hooved with immense three-toed feet of articulated metal. Its massive legs supported a colossal pelvic mount, and the great, riveted torso that housed its throbbing atomic furnaces. Broad shoulders provided ample space for turbo laser batteries. Beneath the shoulder armor, the Titan's arms elevated the machine's primary weapons, a Gatling blaster as the right fist, and a plasma cannon as the left. The head was comparatively small, though I knew it was large enough to contain the entire command deck. It was set down low between the shoulders, making the monster ogreous and hunched, and within I knew sat Fade Thuring. The firefight around us was winnable, but to battle this machine was not. There was only one possible path to victory. Rassi and I combined our wills on my room staff, slamming it into the machine spirit's own mind, as Beckwin prepared to deliver the killing blow after our assault. I felt darkness wash over me. We were in the warp. Blood and ghosts swam around us as we trenched towards the floating mass that was the representation of Cruelvolt. Cherubael, Cherubael, the name grew in my mind. Rassi wailed, the pain of my own memories inflicted upon us both. My fellow Inquisitor made it clear that he had no desire to peer into the abyss of my mind. We broke into the Titan's memory sphere, and may the God Emperor spare me. I saw such things then. I stood on the brink and peered into the abyss of the Titan's memories. I saw cities die in flames. I saw legions of Imperial Guard incinerated. I saw Space Marines die in their hundreds, scurrying around my feet like ants. I saw planets catching fire and burn to ashes. I saw Imperial Titans, proud warlords, burst apart and die under the onslaught of my hands. I saw the gates of the Imperial Palace on Terra, through a blizzard of fire. I saw down through many thousands of years. I saw Horus, vile and screaming out his wrath. I saw the whole heresy play out in front of my eyes. I saw the age of strife, and witnessed firsthand the dark age of technology that preceded it. I fell, plummeting through history, through the stored memory of Cruelvolt. I saw too much, and I started to scream. Rassi slapped me hard around the face. Gregor, come on now, we are almost there. We're at the heart of it all now, frail as whispers. We were in the bridge of the Titan, seeing the multiple, overlapping spectres of the men who had commanded it. All sat in the Princeps throne, all dead. I saw horror, absolute horror. Elizabeth, I yelled. Beckwin leapt forward and grabbed the runestaff from the hands of us two Inquisitors, who were quivering with power, stress and terror. Our eyes rolled up blankly, so that only the white showed. She gripped the runestaff and focused her untouchable force. The staff exploded. It sent Elizabeth flying back, slamming her body into the wall with a sickening crunch. I was screaming from grief. Medea refused to heed my hails. Driven by a grief and vengeance of her own, she brought the cutter in for another attack, aiming for Fade Thuring within the Titan's head. It was no match. The cutter fell from the sky in trails of smoke. Medea, Amos, and many others within, plunging, out of sight. I was knocked to the ground as the Titan turned back upon us. We ducked into the streets and wreckage of the facility as munitions reeked through our position. More of my staff fell. Fishik and Nail shielded the mangled body of Bequin. Risi tried to rally us, but the looks in all our eyes validated the thought we all were thinking. We were going to die here. My mind drifted. I had something more powerful than a Titan. I caught myself. Until that very moment, I had never even considered undertaking an action like this. No matter the preparations, a servant of the Inquisition who makes chaos his tool against chaos is a greater enemy of mankind than chaos itself. Chaos knows the bounds of its evil and accepts it. The servant of the Inquisition who uses chaos is fooling himself, denies the truth, and damned us all by his delusion. My mentor Hapshant's word echoed in my mind, but my mentor was wrong. There was a line between him and Quixos, and my desperation now only clarified it. I grabbed my rune staff and rushed alone towards the Titan. Under its feet I began to recite words from the Malus Codicium, words that gave me nightmares. In a vault locked on Gudrun, a seal unlocked. A demon trapped in scarred flesh burst into existence before me. Cherubael opened its eyes. I pointed at the Krua vault. A white flare of heat illuminated in the distance, and Krua vault died. Fade Thuring died. I've kept my staff and Barbaricata in my hand, for I knew what the demon would target next. I liked you, Gregor, said a voice that scraped inside my skull. Of all men, you had the spirit I admired. I worked for you. I spared you more than once. Consider that. All I asked in return was that you honor our compact and release me. And what did you do? You tricked me. You trapped me. You used me. A star came out over the lake, a hazy ring of white around a brilliant, gleaming center, almost fluttering, like a leaf on the wind. It eddied down towards me, and Cherubael went in for the kill. I parried the creature's initial attacks. It was not at its full strength, but its hatred of me was more than enough fuel. I ran. I weaved through fire and wreckage, all while Cherubael laughed. It was hunting me. I hit the water's edge, near the ruins of the downed cutter, only to find Bastian Vervook, an acolyte sent by Lord Rorken himself to become my next interrogator. The man was young, full of zeal and hope. I felt guilty at being so annoyed by his childlike wonder at me. I felt even worse for the thought that followed. I knelt beside him. His yearning face looked up at me. Damn, that yearning, puppy look. Master? Bastian, I interrupted. Are you a true servant of the Emperor? I am, he replied. And you will so serve him in any way you can. I will, Master. And you are pure? Foolish question. Vervook's damned purity had led to all his mistakes. His puritanical piety had made him a liability in the first place. But he was pure. As pure as any man could be. I placed my hand on his chest. I made my fingers wet with his blood. Then I daubed certain runes and markings on his forehead and face, on his neck and his heart, muttering seldom heard incantations from the Malus Codicium. What are you doing? He wavered. Damned questions. Even now. What must be done? I said. You are doing the Emperor's work, Bastian. Forgive me, Vervook, I said. Of course, Master, he mumbled. For what? He added suddenly, bellowing the incantations of binding, the litany of servitus, the wars of entrapment. I met Cherubael head on, the rune staff glittering with power. I bound the demon host into Vervook's body, as he screamed the scream of a soul tearing. It was Godwin Fishig who found us, Cherubael floating beside me. I saw the look in his eyes. He asked how. How did I know how to bind a demon? Vervook, he was dead when I did it. Surely. I couldn't answer him. I had never prayed so sincerely in my life. The night we boarded transport back to Gudrun, I prayed in thanks that Amos and Medea had survived. I prayed for Fishig's forgiveness. I prayed for Bequin's survival. I prayed for Bastian Vavuk's soul. The weeks that followed were very silent, until we entered my Gudrun estate. I brought Cherubael back into a warded vault. The truth of it, Gregor, it said to me, is that I've missed you. Our times together have always been exhilarating. Quixos was a cruel master, but you understand me. On that island, you called on me for help. Oh, we've had our differences, and you're a tricky so-and-so, but I like that. I think my existence could be an awful lot worse than being in your thrall. So, tell me, what do you have planned? What glorious work will you and I do together? You'll find me willing, ready, in time. You'll be able to trust me, like a friend. I've always wanted one of those. You and me, Gregor, friends, working together. How would that be? That would be impossible, I stated. Oh, Gregor, it chided. Silence, I said. I couldn't stomach its silky tones. I am an Imperial Inquisitor serving the light of the Golden Throne of Terror. You are a thing of filth and darkness, serving only yourself. You are everything I stand against. It licked its lips. Vavuk's canines were becoming ice-white fangs. So why did you ever decide to bind me, Eisenhorn? I regularly ask myself the same question, I said. It tried to beg in Vavuk's voice, but I knew his soul was gone. I struck the bound creature. Understand this, demon. Binding you, using you, that has cost me dearly. I hate myself for doing it, but there was no choice. Now I have enslaved you again. I am going to take no chances. The correct containment of you will now become my life's primary devotion. The history text will not remember me as a man so driven to accomplish things. He got lazy and slack. There is no escape from me now. I will not allow it. You are mine, and you will stay mine. The days that followed, I feared the reaction of my staff. Only a few really had the knowledge to understand what I had done, and what raged inside my vault. Uber Amos, my savant, my living encyclopedia, was first to give me understanding. Medea kept a distance. Fishig, who I had sent on other duties, was no doubt torn. Nail knew nothing, as he guarded what remained of the mortally wounded Elizabeth Bequin. I dare not let myself linger on her too long. I could not face that grief, not yet. The Gudrun estate. Home to my staff was one of my holdings throughout the Helican subsector, each housing at a time members of the Distaff, an elite unit created by Bequin and filled with psychic blanks, now in operation that functioned without me. Yet at this time the estate felt rather empty. I headed to the training grounds, eager to focus my mind, to regain a sense of control. Jubal was my weapons master. He was getting a little old, and on peak form I had no trouble besting him. Where he truly excelled was in combat law and the techniques of military science, for which he had studied his entire life. He used those that morning, preying on my softness and slowness, overwhelming my superior strength and speed with patient expertise. 3/4 of an hour, 5 rounds, 5 touches to him. His old lined face was glowing with perspiration, but he was 5 times the winner I was. Medea Betancourt entered the chambers. Medea took off her father's cerise jacket and hung it on a window knob. What'll it be? I asked, taking a sip of water from a beaker. She walked over to the armory terminal and keyed on the screen, jump cutting rapidly through the graphic templates on the monitor display. She was dressed in a tight, semi-armored body glove, and her feet were clad in training slippers. She had prepared for this, I realized. Blades and power bucklers, she announced, stopping the menu and keying the authority stud. There was something else she wanted to tell me, and something only a blade could convey. We broke and circled. She came in again, leading with her sword. I feinted away with my buckler, then again, and then for a third time as we continued to go to ground. She was canny. Sword and buckler work was as old as all of the worlds, and the trick to staying alive was to use the shield more than the sword. The trick to winning, however, was to use the sword more than the shield. I kept my buckler to the front, but by seeming to be unguarded with her own force shield, lagging back as if casually forgotten, she was inviting me to overstep or to make a badly judged lunge. I left my blade well alone, keeping it where she could see it, and using my shield as hard a nail had schooled me. The buckler was a weapon. Not only could it block, it could lock even or break a blade. I had heard of some duels, where the small shield's solid energy edge had actually delivered the killing stroke to an unprotected windpipe. Medea rotated suddenly, driving my buckler aside with a swipe of her own, and lashed in with her blade. Dancing across the mat, I was forced to parry with my sword, and then rally hard as she kept up the pressure. Her blade sliced within a hand's breadth of my face, and I cross-guarded desperately with both blade and buckler. She drove her own shield in under my guard, and her own locked sword and doubled me in a punch strike to my midriff. I fell onto the mat. "Enough?" she asked. I got up.
"We'll go again."
She came at me again, leading with blade as I had expected. I ducked, swung around and feinted in time for her buckler to swing in to parry my blade. The spitting electrical dish tore the sword from my hand, stinging my fingers, just as I had intended. Her eyes were on my sword, distracted as it flew aside. Now with my free hand, I grabbed her buckler arm above the elbow and pulled it down so that her own power shield locked with her sword as she brought it up. She stumbled. I smashed her across the extended shoulder with the flat of my buckler and knocked her down. I could have used the edge. I could have aimed for her exposed face, but we were sparring.
"Enough?"
I asked. She said nothing.
"Medea!"
She extinguished her buckler and pulled the strapping off.
"What's on your mind?"
Medea looked up at me. "I never wanted revenge."
"You told me you did."
"I know, and I suppose I did. Part of me, revenge, it doesn't feel
Satisfying?
like anything at all. Just empty. Stupid and empty."
Well, I could have told you that. In fact, I think I did.
I helped her up. We didn't speak for a minute or two, as I put the weapons back in the rack and returned them to the underfloor store bay. Then we took beakers of water from the stand, opened up the side doors and went onto the sunlit terrace. It was going to be a hot day. The sky was cloudless and the light was white. The shade of the wood seemed gloriously dark and inviting. The distant inlet was hazy with glare, and the sea glinted like diamonds.
Ever since I was old enough to understand what Fade Thuring did, I've wanted something. I've always presumed it was revenge.
Revenge is a disguise for other, more valid emotional responses,
I said. She looked at me sourly.
"Stop trying to be my father, Eisenhorn."
She might as well have slapped me across the face. I had never thought of it that way.
I only meant...
"You're a very wise man. Very clever, learned. You give people the most profound advice.
I try.
But you don't feel.
Feel, Medea.
You know things, but you don't feel them."
Birds twittered in the edge of the woods and the orchards. Two of the junior ground staff were pressing the lower lawns with a heavy roller. I wasn't quite sure I knew what she meant.
I feel...
No, you do not feel the content of your advice. Most of the time, they're just wisdoms, without heart.
I'm sorry you think that way.
It isn't a criticism. Well, not really. You're just so driven to do what is right that you forget to wonder why it is right.
What?
She sipped her water.
I don't know. You fight the way Kircher tells you to fight, because he says that's the best way to do it.
It usually is.
Of course. He's an expert. That's why you defeated me. But why is it the best way to fight? Using those weapons, for example.
Because
he told you. He's right. But why is he right? You never wonder about that sort of thing. You never wonder what mistakes or decisions were made to arrive at that right way.
I'm still not sure I follow you.
She smiled and shook her head.
Of course you don't. That's my point. You spent your whole life learning the best way to do everything. Learning the best way to fight. The best way to investigate. The best way to learn even. Did you ever wonder why those are the best ways?
I put my glass down. On the low wall at the edge of the terrace, I said nothing.
My father died, and I wanted something, and you told me that it wasn't revenge, and you were right. Revenge is trash, worthless, but why? What was it I needed instead?
I shook my head.
I was only trying to spare you the effort. Revenge is a waste of time and...
No, she said, looking at me directly.
It is a displacement activity. It's something you can lock onto to do, because you can't do the thing you really want to do.
I had grown impatient.
And what might that be, Medea? Do you know?
I do now. Thuring killed my father. I needed something, and it wasn't payback. It was what he took from me. I needed to know my father. If I'd ever had that, then I had never given Thuring another thought.
She was right. It was so obvious. It chilled me. I wondered how many other, similar, obvious mistakes I had made in my life. With my head so full of certain knowledge and my heart so numb, I looked back at the estate. I looked back into the room, and saw Midas' Sarai's jacket hanging where she had left it, draped against the inside of one of the windows like a trapped butterfly.
I can give you what you want. In part, at least. If you really wanted.
Thorn desiring Aegis. Pattern oath. I summoned my astropath Vance and requested that he made preparations. A seance was perhaps the best definition of what we were attempting. Medea brought her father's jacket and needle pistols, hoping to witness a faint after-image of warp memory. We saw it. I was standing at the side of Midas Betancourt. I, Bequin, Fishig, and Amos were dressed impeccably. Midas had always had impeccable taste. As his bride Joranna joined us at the altar, despite what my features failed to show, I was happy. We were all smiling. Another scene. Midas whooping for joy at the news he was to be a father. This is what I should have given Medea a long time ago, but I had offered her her father's post. I had never wondered if it was the right thing to do. I just knew it. Just as Habshant had told me what was the right way. That it was meant to be a Puritan. To never wonder. Only dogmatic obedience. I knew how to fight chaos in the God Emperor's name. One way, at least. But was that the best way? I knew wisdom. But did I understand wisdom? Did I understand where the line was? We cut off. I left Medea in the library. As distant lasfire began to grow louder, I snatched up Midas' needle pistol and ran for the library door. The smell of smoke grew as 3 men rushed from the hallway door. I took down the first and dived for cover. Cease! I willed into them, but the fire kept coming. They were psi-shielded, armored, and equipped with specialist gear. These were no simple raiders. They knew exactly who they were targeting. I took a round to the shoulder and slammed to the ground, only for the last 2 assailants' heads to burst. Amos emerged, wielding my personal bolt gun. I got up. Amos was standing in the nearby doorway. Give it to me, I said, snatching the bolt pistol and freeing the slide. Thank you, Amos, I added. He shrugged. It's most perturbatory, guns and me, he said. But it always seemed to get on, and I always... Amos, hush, I said. What the hell is going on? We are under attack, he said. I need a little more than that, old friend. We went upstairs. Skeins of smoke drifted through the air. I had the needle pistol in one hand and the bolt gun in the other. At the top of the stairs we found 2 members of my house staff. They had been shot against a wall. Oh, that's terrible, Amos muttered. It was. Someone would pay. Amos and I headed to the vault room, putting down 3 more assailants who donned caricature masks. Much of my precious contents and lore was ransacked. I keyed the vault and drew my runestaff and Barbarisator. I paused, then went back for the Malus Codicium, tucking it into my jacket pocket. My loyal friend Cherubael Kircher wasn't going without a fight, as I heard the distant sound of battle. My estate was burning, miles of it alight and exploding. My auto defenses were disabled, and suspiciously, no Arbites forces had even arrived to investigate. They were mercenaries, I was sure of that. Highly trained, highly motivated, utterly ruthless. But who was bankrolling them? And why? Amos and I jumped through a window. Two figures came into view. One was Alina Coy, the untouchable assigned to the house. She was supporting Zell Seister, my hired gun. He had been wounded in the arm and shoulder. My thoughts turned to Medea. The Vox was dead, so I used my will. Vance, another of my men, responded. Tell Medea, the Storm Oak. She'll know what it means. If we get there first, I'll wait as long as I can. We ran, darting into the grounds orchards, trying not to look at the brilliant blaze of the buildings, so I could adjust to the gloom under the trees. They were low, graceful apple, tumen and poloin, planted in orderly rows. The white bark of the tumen trees shone like snow in the dimness. We ran for what felt like an eternity. I slashed Barbarisator against the deactivated fence, and shoved Amos and Alina Coy through. She was young. I could still see the panic in her eyes. Zell Seister was bleeding out. He was down, and began to fire, telling us to go. I gave him my bolt gun and clips, and sprinted deep into the forest grounds. The bolt gun continued to fire for some time. Then it fell silent. May the God Emperor rest Zell Seister and show him peace. Hours, it felt like, trudging through the thick evergreen forest, now smothered in a thick gloom. The storm oak was an enormous tree, once struck by lightning, now housing underneath a supply stash, and emergency gun cutters, one I never believed I would have to use. I, Amos and Alina waited. I reached out with my mind, only to feel the pain of Vance's death. I should have left. I am an Inquisitor. Vengeance was low on my role's priorities, but I had made that mistake before. I powered the cutter and headed back to the estate. I pushed my will out in a radius, telling Medea I was coming. I saw them. A group surrounding a pinned down individual. Medea ran to the cutter as I loosed bolt shells, felling two. Then she was hurled face first into the grass by a las shot. Medea! I accelerated hard, pushing us back into our seats. Amos, get ready with the side hatch, I yelled. I got as close into the patch of weeds where she had fallen as I dared. The down thrust of the plane could cause serious injuries. We jolted hard as I set down. I sprinted out and grabbed Medea as las bolts rained around us. Amos and Alina fired back as I threw us both into the cutter. I felt the pressure slam against me as I rammed to full speed. These mercenaries had cutters of their own and were gaining fast. I stayed within the trees, pushing as fast as I dare go. My concentration was absolute, my adrenaline pumping me to the side of exhaustion. One mistake meant death, and I was sure Amos and Alina thought death was imminent. I needed something drastic. I slammed the controls and lifted us above the tree line. Cutters behind us exploded as others from above were sent spiraling and dodging us. We reached an eclipse and descended, crashing back into the woods. I was alive, I hoped. Before my senses adjusted to the shock, Amos and Alina groaned. Medea was unconscious. I took Alina's pistol as they dragged Medea into cover. I waited, climbing an oak, waiting for the last cutter. It hovered in, examining the wreckage. If I knew mercenaries, then they needed a confirmed kill for payment. I leapt, kicking one man from the height and pointing my pistol at the pilot's head. I was lucky this one was not a fanatic. I removed his psi blocker and willed him unconscious. I didn't know the extent of the damage. The estate was destroyed, hundreds of my staff dead, a possibility that not only my staff on Gudrun, but all of them within the Helican subsector. I couldn't contact anyone. The betrayal may have come from within the Inquisition itself, for I had made enemies over my century of service. We were on our own. Ravello, a hill town in the flanks of the western Antices, situated at the foot of the Insa Pass, on the shores of a long freshwater lake that forms the headquarters of the Great Drunner. It had a small but distinguished university, specializing in medicine and philosophy. A brewery that exports its lake water ale all over Gudrun. I swallowed my pride, walking up to the door I hadn't seen in decades. Kretzia Berchilde answered. Gregor Eisenhorn? Dr. Berchilde of Ravello took a step towards me, registering sleepy astonishment. She was still a very fine figure of a woman. I think she was about to hug me, or plant a kiss on my cheek, but she halted, and her face darkened. 145 years earlier, in 241 M41 to be exact, I had lost my left hand during a firefight. I was fitted with a prosthetic, but I hated it, and never used it. After 2 years, during a stay on Messena, I had surgeons equip me with a fully functioning graft. Kretzia had been the chief surgeon during that procedure. She was incredibly witty and learned. We had stayed in touch, a secret I kept from everyone to protect her from my work. I hadn't seen her in 25 years, because I couldn't say 3 simple words, because in my heart I only loved one woman. A woman who lay on the edge of death, or worse, probably already dead. Elizabeth Beckwin. Kretzia worked into the night, saving Medea's life, only stepping out in the morning, dried blood on her apron. Thank you, Kretzia. I'm in your debt, I said. Yes, you damn well are. You're unbelievable, Eisenhorn. 25 years. 25 years. I don't see you. I don't hear from you and then you turn up, unannounced, uninvited, armed and on the run. So it would appear. And you expect me to just take this in my stride? Not really, I responded. I know it's a terrible imposition, but the Kretzia Burchard I knew could cope with an emergency now and then, and she always had time for a friend in need. A friend, she huffed. Yes, you're the only person I can turn to, Kretzia. She snorted, scornfully, and tugged off her apron. All those years, I was happy to be the one you could turn to, Gregor. And you never did. You kept me at an arm's length. You never wanted me involved in your business. And now, she let the words trail off, and shrugged unhappily. I'm sorry, I said. You bring guns into my house, she hissed. I probably shouldn't tell you about the mercenary tied up in my speeder then, I said. Amos and Alina cleaned up. I made sure the Malus Codicium was still in my jacket. As the sun rose on the next day, I prepared for my task. My prisoner. The pilot was a Vesserine Janissary, a feral world that bred dangerous mercenaries for the highest bidder. They knew no loyalty or fear, clearly willing to even target a member of the God Emperor's Inquisition. His mind, to my irritation, had been planted with a false identity, another countermeasure to my abilities. Much to Kretzia's disgust, I had to interrogate this man. She only agreed so long as she could supervise, the doctor within her likely appalled. I slammed my will into his dehydrated, tired mind again and again. Intel spilled like pulling teeth. 800 of them. The entire clan. All hired to kill me. Kretzia touched my sleeve. You must stop, she whispered. He's beginning to hyperventilate. But I kept going. Marla Teray, an intermediary, a woman who had hired them all. I pushed my prisoner to the point of breaking until one last name spilled. Kanyar the Sharp. Amos and I couldn't sleep. It's most perturbatory, he had said. Not a word, not even on the Arbites band. It was like a conspiracy of silence, for surely news of the estate's destruction should have been spread. Someone managed to hire 800 Vesserine killers, Uber. They have clout. The news has been withheld or censored, I said. The others will know, Amos replied. Fishik, Nail. The moment they don't get a response from Spatian House, they'll know something is up. I hope so, I said somberly. I had been using the kindness of Kretzia. Even now I could still see she had feelings for me, a man who didn't deserve them. But I relied on that comfort when Amos and Alina came to me with the news, taken from planetary vox fragments. I sat down, trembling. Kretzia crouched beside me, hugging me. Gudrun, Thracian Primaris, Messina Prime, every facility, all residents of the Distaff, Bequin, and Nail, all had been hit. No survivors. I had lost everything I had built in my centuries of life. I realized why Kanjar the Sharp had hired so many Vesserine Janissaries. Multiple strikes, multiple worlds. What else had this Kanjar hit? What other pain had he already caused me? I was grateful that my paralyzed face couldn't show the grief I was failing to process. Even Inquisitor Nathan Inshabel, who had joined my hunt for Quixos, had been slain. Every thread that Gregor Eisenhorn had touched was gone. All except Fishik. I had spent days trying to plan, until danger came for us. My prisoner had escaped, his bonds loosened by the sympathetic Kretzia, an advantage the Janissary seized. We had to move. I had no doubt that within hours, this Marla Teray and the rest of this mercenary clan would be upon us. Kretzia was furious. Once again I had come into her life, only to bring pain. She refused to leave, but I wouldn't have her death upon my conscience. Not after I had nearly lost everyone. I hated myself for this, manipulating her through the sympathy of Medea's care. For as a medical professional, she cared little for her own life. I was last at the door until I froze. The Malus Cardicium was still in the drawer of the nightstand. I wrapped it in a pillowcase. How could I have nearly forgotten it? The answer that had occurred to me was strange and unnerving. Perhaps it wanted to be forgotten. We darted from town to town, drawing credits from secret accounts only I knew of. Through a private astropath, I sent communiques out. One to Fishik, and to my surprise, receiving one from Harlan Nail. Of all my staff, I was least surprised he had survived. I kept Nail's status to myself, organizing his return to Gudrun in 2 weeks. I sent out the Glossier, but made some changes. If what I suspected was true, then that too was compromised. Over days we headed deeper into the mountains. Just as the mighty Atenane Range creases the center of Gudrun's largest continent, so the Trans-Antitane Express runs like an artery along it. The railway itself was famously romantic. Most who ride it do so because of the ride. Vacationers would rather travel than arrive. The young flocked to the center of Bruges and Ontir to use them as a base for skiing and ice surfing. But it was the wealthy who chose the Trans-Antitane, where they could sit in coddled luxury and watch Gudrun's most spectacular scenery slip by outside the window. The great, chrome, Promethean-fueled locomotive pulled in at 5. Porters helped us maneuver Medea on board. I looked to her, Elena, Amos, and Kretzia. I wouldn't lose another. We settled in, placing ourselves within our rooms, when I caught Kretzia. We are fleeing for our lives, Gregor, on the most exclusive and opulent mode of travel Gudrun has to offer. I suggest we flee for our lives in style. I went to the bathroom and changed into the most presentable clothes I had with me. Then I linked arms with her, and we strolled back along the companion way to the dining van 3 cars back. Did you bring those clothes with you? I asked quietly. We left in haste, and you packed a gown like that. I thought I should be ready for anything. She smiled back. We talked. We had decades to fill in. She told me about her work and her life. Her interest in Xenos anatomy she had developed, the monographs she had composed, a new procedure for muscle grafting she had pioneered. Whatever Kretzia was to me, she was at least a friend. One whose company I thoroughly enjoyed. Slowly, I slid out of bed, doing my best not to disturb Kretzia. She was still deeply asleep, though she rolled over and reached, murmuring, in the cooling space I had just vacated. I tried to find some clothes. They were strewn on the floor. I wanted to occupy my mind. For the healthy paranoia I felt, I still pondered on this Marla Teray's employer, Kanjar the Sharp. I sifted through records Amos had scribed to me, all the hits taken against my organization and associates. Quenthus 8, a world that stuck out to me. I had only heard that world mentioned by one individual. Amos had already cross-referenced the lists of words using Kanjar, with worlds owning the surname Teray, and had come up with several hundred possibilities. But there it was. Kanjar, Kanjar was the word of a war knife on Quenthis 8, and Teray was a clan name from that world. Nearly 350 years before, I recalled the story of a man with an amulet, a corruption that began on this world. Marla Teray's reports claims to have been born on Gudrun, but had been discounted by Amos, who had checked the census and found no sign of the name. But he hadn't gone back 3,500 years. I did, and found that Teray had been a peasant name on Gudrun until that time. The family tree ended there, but I knew who it was. I knew who my enemy was. Guilt, hate, and strangely betrayal washed over me. My enemy is Pontius Glaw. Magos Bure was dead. He had to be. Pontius Glaw's existence was a secret because I never informed the Ordos that he was still sentient. Because I never delivered his engram sphere into the custody of the Ordo Hereticus, as I should have. And he was only free now because I had built a body for him. And now everything I had built was in ashes. And what could I do? Ask the very organization I hid him from to help fight against the heretic I hid from them? It was Amos that comforted me. "You may now regret your actions with Pontius Glaw," he said. "But without those, Quixos would not have been brought down. We cannot play the if-only game all day. The simple truth is that victory comes at a price, and we are paying that price now. The true measure of your character is what you do with it." I vowed to bring Glaw down. The train's emergency brake activated. I woke the others and ushered them into Medea's room, who mercifully was now conscious. I put on Amos's overcoat and moved down the carriages. I found the train staff, pressing my will into them to get answers. Cabin 34 had been opened to the blistering frozen winds of the mountain outside, and it had been opened from within. One of the staff's trackers had gone down. I touched a worker's forehead. My psi imprint would stay with him for a good 30 minutes now, even once he was out of my vicinity. I sent him to the employee's room for confirmation of what I suspected. They found a corpse. I ran back down the train towards Car 3, using the lower deck hallways. I slid Barbarasata from its scabbard. It seemed so incongruous to be hurrying down a train's companionway, brandishing a sword, but the cabins around me were full of innocent Imperial citizens, and I didn't dare use my pistol. The lights went out, and I was smothered in dark, periodically lit by seeming alarms. I realized there were 3 dark shapes halfway down the hall ahead of me, skulking low. They hadn't heard me arrive over the howl of the blizzard and the shrill of the alarms. Vesserine Janissaries. I charged. I made a Gahan Vassal. The figure of 8 struck and smashed the first 3 shots away. Impact sparks, sheeting from the energized sword blade. Then I struck an Uwe Sa, and an Ulsa, and a Ura Willin Be'ai in rapid series, deflecting squashed rounds in the paneling around me. Wood splintered. People were screaming in the cabins all around. I rolled and came up to my feet as the first Vesserine rounded the car-ended corner and fired half a dozen times. Barbarasata removed his head. The second one was charging and firing too. He let out a mask-muffled bellow as he saw his comrade collapse in pieces. I threw an Ura gaze sequence that diverted the white blurs of his bullets, then followed in with an Uin Tahan Wilar that chopped the barrel of his weapon off. A reverse Tahan stroke that severed his forearms, and then an Uid Ka, the death stroke. It took grazing wounds until the third was poised to finish me. Cressier's cyber skulls launched from our cabin and began stabbing repeatedly with their surgical lasers. Lena Coy met my gaze with pistol drawn. I screamed for her to move the others into a different position. I picked myself up and made for the door. The bitter wind hit me like a sheet of needles as I climbed to an outer ladder. My body grew numb as I struggled to stand in the blizzard winds. I moved up, seeing the next squad of Janissaries preparing to enter through a side window. I cut 2 of the lines. The bodies were swallowed by the dark of the mountain storm. The third reacted faster, goring his own blade into my shoulder. I switched to a 2-handed grip. Our blades clashed in a shower of sparks. Any blade methods had to be semi-improvised. Neither of us were on steady feet, our boots sliding on the iced metal, and the gale dragged at us hard. Pontius Glaw had hired the best. The skill of the Janissaries matched my own. I pushed him back, forcing him to jump backwards onto the next cart. I tried to press my advantage, only for my leg to slip out from beneath me. I dropped Barbarisator, I and the sword tumbling over the edge. Until one-handed I gripped the side with my numbing fingers. The Janissary walked slowly towards me, smiling. I had no time for honor. I stabilized. I drew my pistol in my coat and fired. The body tumbled off the edge. I wielded my authority as an Inquisitor as I climbed back into the cart. I requisitioned it in the name of the God Emperor's Holy Inquisition, more to prevent questions from the staff. We picked up again, making our way towards New Give, the hive city at the end of our track. Medea was up and well again when I received a transmission from Harlan Nail, who would meet us in a bar within the hive city. I read the glossia again and sighed deeply. I read the error and prepared myself for what was waiting for us. I was shrouded in Amos's overrobe, the hood pulled up, wearing a rebreather mask I had borrowed from the Express. I wanted to look like some tech adept on his lunch break. The place was largely empty. A bored-looking steward polished glasses behind the narrow sweep of the bar. A hooded figure got up and wandered over to me. Rosethorn. I looked up. That's me. She dropped the hooded cloak away from her shoulders. She had sharp features and long, straight black hair. Her coal-edged eyes glinted like jade. Not Harlan Nail at all. Marla Teray. Other drinkers in the bar had gotten up and formed a circle around us. Marla Teray clicked her fingers and they all drew back coats, or cloaks, to reveal the handguns they carried. She clicked again and the weapons disappeared. The person responsible for the assault on my estate sat before me. They had broken Glossia. She smiled. I could feel her powerful mind trying to delve into mine. "You're using shielding techniques," she said, her face darkening. "Of course I am," I replied. "You would be too if the situation was reversed. I have to say though, I'm disappointed. I was hoping that Pontius might be here himself. This is a trap after all. Eisenhorn's last stand. He might have been civil enough to come and watch me die." "Pontius is busy elsewhere," she snapped, and then realized what she'd said. "Thank you for the confirmation," I said. I let go of the warp vortex that had been spinning in my mind ever since I had summoned it. From the animated body of a Janissary, Marla Teray was atomized. In the last milliseconds of her life, her mental shields collapsed in terror, and I got a precious snapshot into a powerful psycho mind. Not everything, but enough. Enough to know that I had just eliminated Pontius Glaw's daughter. My staff had to break down the door of the premise we were in. I had fallen unconscious and was ill for 2 days. I had read the Malus Codicium again, peeling from it the art of puppeteering and vortex manipulation. The replies from Miss Harlan Nail in Glossia had made a mistake only I would notice, so I turned the trap into my own. I killed the architect of my staff's murder, and wounded Pontius Glaw's own operation in turn. Though to Medea, Amos, Elena and Cretzia, I saw how they disapproved of my methods, particularly Amos. My old friend Tobias Maxilla, eccentric master of the sprint trader Asen, had come in response to the Glossia code word, Sanctum, without hesitation. Maxilla was, as ever, the perfect host, and the general spirit did pick up, a little once we were in his company. He was dressed in a checkered, cedral gown coat, a blue silk cravat pinned with a golden star pin, and a purple suede calotte with a silver tassel. His skin dye was gloss white with black hearts over his eyes, and a fine platinum chain ran between the diamond earrings in his left lobe to the sapphire stud in his nose. Behind him, gold-plated servitors waited with salvers of refreshments. He greeted us all, flirting with Medea and making a particular fuss of Cretzia and Elena, 2 females he had not met with before. We spent many nights dining, as I finally told Maxilla of what we had been through. His dyed face became tragic, like a clown's, as I told him about Elizabeth. He had always had a soft spot for her. I found a renewal in speaking to Maxilla, not a justification, but acceptance. That the deaths of my staff was not my fault. It is chaos. It is the enemies of the Emperor of Mankind that are responsible. Across his realm stands over 1 million worlds. Billions die in the defense of his domain. That was what they died for. I showed Maxilla the Malus Codicium. A man who enjoyed collecting from all over the galaxy told me, rather nonchalantly, to destroy it. I stared at the book that had brought me all this trouble. In truth, it may not be that Glaw wished to destroy me. That was an afterthought. He wanted this damn book. I agreed with Maxilla. One day, I would destroy it. After weeks, the Ascend docked at Hubris, a world I hadn't seen in over a century, a world where I had killed Cultivus Iclone and recruited Elizabeth Beckwin and Godwin Fishik. You should have destroyed that monster years ago, Eisenhorn, said Godwin Fishik. That, or handed him over to the Ordos. What the hell were you thinking? Same as I am thinking now. I did what was best, I said. A creep of anger grew in my voice. Nail, Cherubael, Pure, the whole damn distaff. Was that best? Fishik's tone was venomous, a resentment that had likely grown since seeing Cherubael again, amongst the wreckage of the crew of Old Titan. Yes, Fishik, and I never heard you contradict my decisions. Like you'd have listened, he muttered. Do you really think I'm that underhanded? You, of all my council, I respect the most, I pleaded. Who told Björn to build Chlora body without telling any of us? Who suddenly knows how to conjure demons like an expert? You cover your secrets with such an almighty righteousness air. We all thank the stars and the Emperor himself you chose us to help you in your work. But you're a liar, a conspirator, and maybe worse. He looked hurt. And you're too much a Puritan idealist for your own good, and mine, I hissed. I dearly wanted your help, Godwin. You are one of the few men I fully trust. I'm one of the few humans in space with a stalwart spirit to keep me on that level. I need you now, in my fight to destroy Glaw. I can't believe you're turning against me like this. He stared down at the contents of his glass. I always did warn you. I would if you crossed the line. I've crossed no line, I retorted. But if you feel that way, get out of this ship and leave me to my work. You'll always have my gratitude for the service you put in, but I won't have this bitterness. He hesitated. I gave my life to you, Gregor. I admired you. I always believed you were right. I still am. I serve the Emperor, just like you. Get rid of your rancor and we can work together again, I retorted. We both stared at each other. Let me think about it, he whispered. It had only been a few days since our reunion, and one of my longest-serving allies prepared to leave our ship. He stormed off, when in that very night Medea and Amos came to him, telling him everything. Cherubael, the Malus Codicium, the possession, everything, in an attempt to reason with him. I found him in a dive bar later that evening. Whatever Medea has told you, whatever Amos has told you, it's true. But it's not what you think, I said. I'm no heretic, Godwin. Fishik turned to me. He'd had nearly a day to think. He looked at me with a look I couldn't place. I should have tried harder, he said. You're not gone. Not all the way. You're just slipping. Slipping, I said. Into the pit. The radical pit. The pit no one comes back from, but I can pull you out. I stared at Fishik. I stared at the grey that tinged the sides of his hair. I realized then that he, in over a century of service, was the same man, but I was not. I think this is where I say goodbye. I admire your efforts, but I can't be saved, Godwin. You can, he pleaded. No, I shook my head. You know why. I don't need saving. Then this is where I say goodbye too, he said, pouring another drink. Remember what we did, I said. I strolled aboard the Ascend, relaying to the others that Fishik wasn't coming. Kretzia hadn't formed a positive opinion of the man, but the others looked wounded. Kanjar must be stopped. Promedy, a jungle world. My old pupil Gideon Ravener, sustained by his fourth chair, rolled across the mossy ground to greet me. I had received his communications on Hubris days after my arrival. The mention of my adversary was enough for us to make all haste to his position. I looked upon my pupil, the best inquisitor I had ever trained. Figures stood beside him that I long thought dead. To his left, he was flanked by Kara Swall, one of my enforcers. To his right, Harlan Nail, ex-bounty hunter turned inquisitorial muscle. I felt a sense of hope flood me, for the responsibility of Beckwin's care had been trusted to them, and my heart swelled for the chance of her survival. I and Gideon left. I walked beside him as his support throne floated. I was very interested to hear more about Kanjar the Sharp.
My work in the last few years has required me to develop an understanding of divination and prophecy.
Gideon said slowly.
Things have been revealed to me. Things of great significance.
I could tell he was being very careful about what he said. It was as if he wished to tell me more, but didn't dare. I decided I should respect his caution, and allow him to tell me only what he felt he could tell me.
One of those revelations, a vision, if you like, forecasts that a violent fate would befall the distaff on Messina. The event was predicted to the precise hour, but I couldn't get there in time to prevent it.
The destruction of the distaff was predicted?
With distressing accuracy.
I suddenly realized I was hearing his voice, by which I mean the voice Ravener had used before his terrible injuries. A voice produced by a man whose mouth and larynx had not been melted by burning promethium. I had become so used to the monotone synthetic speech of his chair's psi-activated vox sponder.
My work has also allowed me to perfect stronger psionic abilities,
he said, and one of them was clearly reading my service thoughts.
I ditched the vox sponder about a year ago. I've developed enough psionic control to broadcast my speech naturally.
I'm hearing you in my head.
Yes, Gregor. Hearing the voice you're used to. It doesn't work with untouchables, or psychically shielded individuals, of course. That's why I keep the old vox sponder on standby.
He uttered the last part of his sentence mechanically, via the toneless voice box built into his chair at the grating. Emotion-free electronic words made us all laugh with surprise.
Though I was too late to save the distaff, I got Kara, Harlan, and Elizabeth to safety off-world.
For that, you have my gratitude. But why summon me so far off the beaten track to meet with you?
Promedy has secrets that we need.
What manner of secrets?
I've been allowed to see the future, Gregor, and it isn't pretty. Imperial culture has never set much store by divination.
Gideon told me.
I've come to suspect that is a great weakness.
It was much later. Night had fallen over the swampy bayou, and the air was dancing with bioluminescent flies. Ravener and I had taken a stroll along the grav walks behind his camp.
A weakness? Surely it is a greater weakness to take it seriously. If we believe the rantings of every dribbling marketplace seer, of every demented ecclesiarchy prophet who claimed to have been granted divine revelations,
we would be mad. True. Most of it is rubbish, lies, mischief, the delusions of broken minds. Sometimes prophetic insights are genuine, but they are usually made by psychers who have done it by accident, or who are insane. In either case, the visions are untrustworthy, or too confused to be interpreted in any practical, useful way. But just because mankind isn't very good at it, doesn't mean that it can't be done.
It is my understanding that other races are reputed to excel at it.
That has certainly been my experience. Serving the Ordo Xenos has been enlightening. The more I have studied alien races in order to discern their weaknesses, the more I have learned their strengths.
We are talking about the Eldar, aren't we?
I risked the question. He didn't reply immediately. His last words had been close to heresy. The force sphere around him flickered slightly with anxiety.
They are a strange breed. They are able to read the invisible geography of space-time and unravel probability with great precision. But they are mercurial. Sometimes they use their insight as a lever to change the outcome of events. Sometimes they stand idle and watch as prophecies play out. I believe there is no human alive who could explain why they make the choices they do. We just don't see things the way they do.
Their greater lifespan gives them greater perspective.
It's partly that. Although orthodox thinking would say that greater perspective is their curse. The Ministorum believes the Eldar are too resigned to destiny, that they are indolent and almost cruel, or else brutally manipulative.
You don't think so?
I'll admit only a selfish fascination, Gregor. They interact with the fundamental structure of the universe. As you might well appreciate, any talent for living or perceiving beyond one's physical body is attractive to me. My work has...
He broke off.
Gideon.
I wanted to learn something of the way their minds witness reality, independent of their bodies. Their farseers, for example, have a kinesthetic sensibility that operates regardless of the restraints of time and space.
We paused at the edge of a walkway and looked out across the misty nocturnal swamp. Glowing insects and airborne spores drifted in the air, their paths occasionally punctuated by the sudden swoops of aerial night hunters. Sinuous things moved the glistening water, below the floating walkways, barely disturbing the oily surface.
You do not need to be guarded with me, Gideon. I will not judge you for seeking knowledge. I'm not the Puritan you once knew.
I know. I would tell you, if I could. But in order to learn certain things, I've been forced to make promises.
To the Eldar?
I cannot even confirm that. I'm not proud of the promises, but I will honour them.
Then what can you tell me? You said that things have been revealed to you.
One of their kind has foreseen a great darkness ahead of us all. It is so abrupt and acute that it has twisted and altered the skeins of probability that the Eldar read. It was revealed to him in a sequence of connected visions. One of those was the destruction of the distaff. When that came true, I was shaken. It proved the visions were not fanciful.
What else has he seen?
A living blade. A man-machine, bestriding a long-dead world and preparing to strike a blow that will spill human and Eldar blood alike. After that, nothing.
I looked down at him.
Nothing.
Nothing. That vision is the most distant thing he is now able to see. It's no more than 6 months from now. Beyond that, he has been unable to glimpse anything at all.
Why?
Because there is no future left to see.
Gideon's message to me proved that he already knew the name Kanjar the Shah. But as we talked, I discovered he knew very little besides the name.
Nail and I tracked the Janissaries after they fled Messina, in an effort to discover who had hired them. It was well hidden. The Vesserine take great pains to protect the identity of their clients. There were false trails, payments from bogus accounts and via holding companies. But we wormed it out eventually. Kanjar the Sharp.
Which meant what to you?
Nothing, except that he was the individual who had ordered the systematic destruction of your operation, and that his name featured prominently in a number of the Farseer's visions. We believe Kanjar and the man-machine from the climactic revelation are one and the same.
Kanjar the Sharp is Pontius Glaw,
I said. He was astonished and excited. The revelation had said nothing of Glaw. The Kanjar guide had masked his true identity from the Eldar.
Why target you?
Self-preservation. I am one of the few people who knows he still exists. In fact, I'm sorry to say, he exists because of me. He was also searching for something that he believes I possess.
Like what?
I had no choice but to tell him everything. My dealings with Glaw, Mala Teray, the Malus Codicium.
You weren't joking when you said you weren't the Puritan I once knew.
Are you shocked?
No, Gregor, I'm not. I believe radicalism is inevitable. We all become radicals eventually, as we appreciate that we must know our enemy in order to defeat him. The real dangers come from extreme Puritans. Puritanism is fueled by ignorance, and ignorance is the greatest peril of all. That's not to suggest the path of the radical is easy. Eventually, even the most careful and responsible radical will be overwhelmed by the warp. The real judge of character is what good a man can do for the Imperium before he is drawn too far.
Thorn requires talon, shades of eternity, rapturous beasts below. This is Eisenhorn, the figure said. It wasn't a question. The words flowed melodically, with a strange cadence that no human could ever approximate. Who am I addressing? I said. The hooded Eldar before me radiated disgust, staring at the pocket that held the Malleus Codicium. I let down my psychic defenses, tempting it to look into my mind to see if I am true. It almost took the bait. Ravana may have worried by the thought of an Ordo Xenos Inquisitor fraternizing with ancient Eldari, but I more than most understood. The Lord Seer began to talk reluctantly. In the first days, a race came from the Maelstrom and raised settlements in this space. 7 worlds they made, and the greatest of these was Ghoul. Then they were overturned and left no trace behind. They fled a war. Their king was dead and they carried his body for burial. On his tomb they raised the first city, and then made 6 worlds around it to honor his rest forever. Ghoul is the tomb of a demon king? I interjected. There was no response. Coming through our intelligence, Gideon and I arrived at the word of Ghoul. We were lost until the knowledge from our Xenos stranger enlightened us. Promedy. This jungle world had been visited by this Kanjar the Sharp, Pontius Glaw, and could hold the truth to the location of this ancient demon tomb of Ghoul. It was only one part. Pontius Glaw had killed my staff as an act of revenge, but perhaps he also needed the Malleus Codicium to unlock some kind of treasure hidden within Ghoul. The Eldar withdrew, and I was glad to be out of its presence. I found it hard to know how Ravana tolerated him. I joined Gideon as a cabal of sanctioned psychers gathered. A seance, some called it, a memory echo that I had last used for Medea to witness her father Midas. An image resolved. 3 figures, wading through knee-deep water. I saw him. It was tall, broad, and moved with a strange stiffness, its body partially draped with what looked at first like a cape of feathers. They weren't feathers, they were blades, tongues of polished, sharpened metal interlaced into an armored garment. Beneath it, I could glimpse a body of burnished chrome, dullery and steel, a mechanical humanoid body of marvelous design, the work of the late Geared Beer. This was Pontius Glaw. I could see his face. It was the face of a beautiful young man with a mane of curled hair, but the hair didn't move, and the expression didn't alter from a curling smirk. It was a mask worked from gold, like the head of a noble gilded statue. The Eldar figure joined us again, combined its own formidable mental strength to our psychers. It expanded the memory, enough for us to see Pontius enacting his own seance. We saw it, the surface of Promedy as it had been eons before the age of man, a cyclopean city of glassy black rock that had long since vanished so completely, only its psychic phantom remained. It was fascinating and terrifying. So few things in the galaxy made me feel so insignificant. I felt dizzy. Glaw was capering and dancing like a lunatic, his machine body lurching and awkward. We had him, but Glaw was at least weeks ahead of us, with Marla Teray dead. That had thrown a wrench in his plans, but I had no doubt he would find another way to acquire his prize. I was immediately grateful to Gideon. He and the Eldar Seer dissected through the scripts to find the location of this ghoul, and we made preparations to launch our own attack against my adversary. Before we departed, Kretzia and I boarded Gideon's ship. Within the medic bay lay the broken, comatose form of Elizabeth Beckwin. She would never wake. She'd lie in an endless dreaming state. It was the first time Kretzia laid eyes upon the woman who would forever hold a place in my heart. I did not deserve the friendship of Kretzia, for it was her who kept me from emotionally running away. She knew me too well. She can probably hear you, she said suddenly. Do you think so? I said. Kretzia shrugged and smiled. I don't know. There's every chance she can. And if she can't, does it matter? Tell her, Gregor. Now, before you go. Tell her for goodness sake. Do the right thing by one of us at least. She left me alone, and I sat beside Elizabeth's cot. For a moment, just a moment, I let the walls down. I let go of Inquisitor Eisenhorn and embraced me, the man beneath it all, Gregor. I looked down at Elizabeth Beckwin and I told her I loved her, that I had for over a century and should have said it sooner, that I wished our natures were different and we could have been together. I unloaded my pain, my grief, my happiness, and my love. The Ascend slipped its moorings. I consulted with Maxilla and Amos, as Kara brought Medea and Alina back up to fitness. In the weeks of research, it was Amos who came to me, asking to use the Malus Codicium for insight. I know the procedures, he had said grumpily. You've had me study prohibited texts before. Not like this one, I said, my reluctance evident in my voice. I kept an eye on Amos after that, visiting him regularly and making sure he came to meals. He became tired and short-tempered. I wanted to take the book away from him, but he said he was nearly done. We were a week from Gigandia Station when he finished his work. The Barque of the Demon King, an ancient ship, a weapon of inconceivable power that lie entombed in the mausoleum of Gaul. That prize, Amos said, so I am told, is what Glaw is after. Told, I said warily. I was certain he used that very phrasing. A clock in Amos's study chimed, at the wrong time. My savant began to look nervous. I asked for the codicium back, and reluctantly pried it from his hands. The powers we face are great, too great perhaps. We are woefully under strength. I think we should be stronger, Amos muttered. Summon the demon host. What? I said in disbelief. He took off his heavy augmetic eyeglasses and polished the lenses with the corner of his robe. His hands were shaking badly now. I didn't approve before, Hondura, he continued. But I think I grasp things a little better now. I understand the choices you've made, the rules you've bent, all for the good. And I apologize for ever doubting you. With the demon host, we might stand a chance. Summon it here, like you did on Miquel. I stared at him levelly. I won't kill a man just to provide a host, I retorted. You did on Miquel, he hissed softly. What did you just say? I snapped. You did on Miquel. Vavuk wasn't dead. You sacrificed him for the good of us all. Why would you flinch from doing it again? He tried to leave. I willed him to stop. Screaming at him to reveal what it told him, Amos collapsed into a weeping mess. I couldn't crack the code, he wailed. The language was beyond me, but there was so much more in that book. That beautiful book. I realized I could do more. You spoke to the demon host. You spoke to Cherubael, I screamed in rage. I locked Uber Amos into isolation. The words of my mentor Hamshant pounded in my head. A servant of the Inquisition who makes chaos his tool against chaos is a greater enemy of mankind than chaos itself. Chaos knows the bounds of its own evil and accepts it. A servant of the Inquisition who uses chaos is fooling himself, denies the truth, damns us all by his delusion. I hated myself. It was my fault. Amos wasn't prepared to face such a foe as the conniving Cherubael. For even a veteran Inquisitor myself, I too struggled against the demon host's words every time we interacted. I made a resolution. If I lived, if I vanquished Glaw, I would destroy the Malus Codicium, and then return to Gudrun and destroy Cherubael. I would take my runestaff and annihilate it, just as I had annihilated his kin profanity on Farnus Beta. There would be no more towing the line. I would never go near it again. The Ascend docked at a naval yard. Medea and I strode up to the port lounge, only to be greeted by Godwin Fishig. I faced him across the room. What are you doing here, Godwin? I said. My guard was up. Waiting for you, Gregor. waiting for a chance to make things right. I had never seen him so calm. "Godwin, you questioned my purity, branded some of my actions heretical, and then offered to redeem me. I was drunk with that last part," he said, with a tiny flash of a smile. I didn't believe him for a second and began scanning the room. It was Medea who had given him our location, and I was furious with her. "He's one of us," she had snapped at me. "One of the band. He kept sending to the ship. Sending, and you wouldn't listen to him." So I replied, "He is a man who's devoted his life to you. A man who got a bit angry with you and then thought about it and regretted it. Fishig wants to make amends. He wants to be with us again. Haven't you ever regretted anything?" "More than you could possibly imagine, Medea. But you should have told me first," I retorted. "I asked her not to," Fishig said. "I imagined how you'd react. I'm grateful Medea thought so highly of me. Could you not find it in you to trust me again? Trust me like she does?" I felt as if I was looking at my younger self. The Eisenhorn of the Necrotuk affair. Fishig was so relaxed. But I knew that look in his eye. "Why are you psi-shielded?" I asked slowly. "Just a precaution," he said, as he drew a pistol. Figures emerged from all around. Inquisitor Haldane, former pupil of Commodus Vogue, stepped out. His face, that had been surgically deformed to inspire fear and loathing. Medea and I were restrained and taken back to the Ascend. I, Medea, Maxilla, and Alina were on our knees. "4, said Maxilla. "These 4. The rest are my crew, servitors all of them, slaved into my ship." He was playing the part of the innocent shipmaster, outraged at the invasion of his vessel, distancing himself from his troublesome passengers and protecting Kara and Amos. But I knew he was frightened. "You're lying, I can tell," said Haldane, pacing around Maxilla. "Your defenses are good. I'll grant you that, shipmaster. Don't lie to me." Maxilla was struck, and then cried out in pain. "Don't lie to me," Haldane roared. Fishig pleaded to leave him alone, but Haldane screamed him into submission. I could tell my old friend had planned this to go very differently, and was now realizing it was completely out of his control. Maxilla was brave, as Haldane circled. I tried placating him, informing of my injured savant Amos in the infirmary. I bargained with some truth, in the effort of calming the Inquisitor. Haldane turned to a couple of his men, telling them to go to the infirmary, locate this man, kill him and incinerate his remains. "God Emperor, no," I cried. I tried to get up, tried to reach out with my mind to wrest Barbarossator from Haldane's hands. I was too weak, and he was too strong. Another psychic assault smashed me to the floor. They dragged us to the SN's lavish dining hall. A new face entered that made my fear turn to dread. Lord Inquisitor Ozma. I had last seen his face inside Akkadian prison, eager for my death during the Quixos affair. My head escaping his clutches had now come full circle. I saw Fishig's face turn from sorrow to true pain, as Haldane and Ozma asked for the Malus Codicium, for the location of Cherubael, and his command words. He looked around at Ozma and Haldane. "You don't want the demon host, do you, masters?" "It must be contained and dealt with," said Ozma. "Leave this business to your superiors. Please, you interrupt too much." "But the demon host," said Fishig. "You talk like you want it for yourselves." Ozma glanced at the long-snouted Inquisitor. He ushered Haldane to remove Fishig. He had served his purpose. Fishig descended down the stairs and sat down on one of the couches, gazing at Alina and Medea, who were trying to make Maxilla comfortable. The Ascend began to move, drifting from the docks as explosions began to rocket. The Inquisitorial guards came on alert as Haldane stormed towards Maxilla. Haldane hurled him across the chamber. The Inquisitor was strong by any standards, but he supplemented his physical strength with telekinesis. Maxilla hit the wall in a terrible splintering impact, and Haldane held him there with his powers for an awful moment, squashing him against the wall with his mind. There were several loud cracks of bone and metal. Then he let him go, and the limp, broken body of Tobias Maxilla fell to the marble deck, not moving. I felt my rage and grief mix in my soul as I glared at Haldane and Ozma. Fisher cried out too, but Haldane simply silenced him. Then the sound of ear-scraping laughter grew. Sickly green energies began to twist around the chamber as a mutilated gold-inlaid servitor rose into the air. A being emerged from it, and Cherubael was here. Ozma was staring at the demon host in astonishment. It suddenly occurred to me that despite his rank and authority, he had probably very little first-hand experience with abominations like Cherubael. "You wanted the demon host, Grandmaster," I said. "Looks like you've got him." My words snapped him into activity as he looked around, but Barbarasata was already hissing through the air directly into my extended hand. Medea and Elena rose. I launched at Ozma as Cherubael soared towards Haldane and his guards. I pleaded with Ozma to see reason and work with me. His hammer was his answer, smashing me aside. A blast of energy erupted through the chaos and blood, pushing through Ozma's skull. I turned back to see Maxilla's hand elevated, his weapon ring emitting smoke. Haldane slashed with his sword in terror. The blade melted. The Inquisitor's clothes caught on fire, ablaze from head to foot with green flames. He screamed. On fire, upright, fixed to the spot. He looked just like a heretic burning at the stake. His inquisitorial guards trying desperately to save him. Cherubael looked away from his prey, bored with it now it was dying. It surged forward and floated towards me. Alina let out a sobbing whimper as she held the retrieved Malus Codicium from one place they hadn't thought to look. My own coat. "You clever old stick, Gregor," laughed Cherubael. "Always careful enough to have an untouchable at your side when we meet. This isn't the regular one though, is it? What happens to her?" I wrenched the book open to the page of banishment. Just reading it wounded him and sent him smashing into the walls. I told Medea and Elena to flee as I went over to Maxilla. His eyes flickered as he looked up at me. "I didn't mean it," he said in a tiny voice. "I told that brute none of you meant anything to me, but I didn't mean it." Maxilla, my friend, let out his last breath. I left the room in flames, Haldane's men too preoccupied with saving their burned master. In the corridor I saw Fishik follow me, pistol drawn. I was sure he wouldn't fire until a shot exploded my left knee. I cried out and fell, leaning on Barbarasata. There was blood everywhere. I couldn't believe he'd found the will to do it. With a yelp of pain I hauled myself up on the sword. He fired again, and now my right leg went out from under me, also mangled at the knee. "It's all lies," he screamed. "Always been lies. You know you nearly fooled me back then. I was almost convinced I'd made a terrible mistake going to Ozma. But then you showed your true colors. Brought that demon back and proved everything I feared about you was true. Please, renounce it all. Repent your sins and accept the Emperor, for the good of your soul. It's not too late. Please, I can save you. You're my friend, and I can still save you from yourself." "I don't need saving," I managed to roar back through my pain. He aimed the gun at my head. Fishik had promised me a long time ago that he would be there to keep me in check. Fishik fell in a loud clank to the corridor floor. I struggled to pull myself up so I could lean my back against the wall. Medea crouched down next to me. Tears were streaming down her cheeks. She let go of her father's needle pistol, and I stared at my friend's lifeless body. Hate, relief, pain, regret, all of it at once. My legs were crippled, bloody and useless. Kara appeared behind us, a las carbine in her hands, with Aaliyah and Amos at her heels. They all looked in horror at the sight of me and Fishik. I looked at Amos. "You summoned Cherubael. It was you, wasn't it? You summoned him into one of the SN's poor bloody astropaths. They were going to burn us as heretics," he said softly. "And then we'd never be able to stop Glaw." I couldn't be angry. The pain of my injuries made my head throb. From the end of the corridor a sickly green light grew. Cherubael was upon us again. My legs were eviscerated. I couldn't reach for the Malus Codicium. We were going to die. Amos stepped forward, picking up my rune staff. There was a release of power, and a light so powerful that it was beyond sound. The host's body disintegrated, showering us all in a hail of burned flesh, charred bone and blackened augmetic debris. My savant had briefly dissipated it, but it would return. We had to bind it. We needed a body. Amos's now blank eyes looked forward. Holding the rune staff as Alina, Medea and Kara helped me draw the rune circles in my own blood. I spoke the foul words and bound Cherubael once again. Maxilla's personal cutter engines roared as we escaped the imploding Essen. Kara helped me to the side of the now fragile and weak Uber Amos. "You hold on," I said. "There's a portable Medicae unit in the cargo section. Alina's trying to get it working." He grunted something and swallowed. He surprised me suddenly by taking my blood-stained hand and gripping it tightly. He turned his head slowly and squinted at the demon host we had made together. It sat, strapped into its seat, on the other side of the aisle, head bowed and dormant. "Most," he whispered. "Most perturbatory." I should have said something, but his grip had slackened. His breathing had stopped. Uber Amos died in my arms. My consciousness faded. The last image of face Cherubael purposely kept. The face of Godwin Fishig. Ghoul, or 5213X. 3 strike teams. One led by myself, Ravenor, and one formed from the Eldar. Tall, inhumanly slender, silent, keeping themselves to the part of the ship assigned to them. Aspect warriors Gideon had called them. Crude biometrics had been screwed into my skull and spine, allowing me to move my broken legs. Upon reuniting with Gideon, Kretzia had been heartbroken, begging me to undergo extensive medical help, but I couldn't afford to let Pontius Glaw succeed. His death I would gladly trade for my quality of life. I clunked across the barren ashscape of Ghoul, flanked by Kara, Medea, and Nail. It was like the universe itself wished this place stay hidden. The planet emitted a scrambling frequency. Light seemed to die in the blanketing black haze. I knew that all of my companions had sensed it. The dark cloud that hung over me. My staff at the estates. Maxilla, Fishig, Amos, and Beckwin. I had lost too much. The surface of Ghoul had been engraved. That's what it looked like. A perfect black sphere, engraved across its entire surface with tight, deep, interlocking lines. In reality, each of those lines was a smooth-sided gorge, 200 meters wide and 900 meters deep. Along these we traveled towards the buried ruins of a city. Precise cuts and shapes jutted from the ash. In such tolerances it made me feel unnerved. The greater mystery of this world's past inhabitants was a question for someone else. I was here for Glaw. The serene Janissaries had been encountered by our Xenos allies. As we pushed deeper, our converging teams engaged them. Cherubael, I commanded. The demon host had been drifting high above the gorge, trailing us like a kite. But now it descended, ripping a bloody toll through Glaw's men. I had been more careful this time, binding even stronger walls to ensure Cherubael was fully under my control. It made the creature weaker, but still a formidable tool. I noticed something else about this new Cherubael. It didn't laugh anymore. Ever. Its face wore a permanent frown. It showed no signs of taking any pleasure in its slaughter. I was pleased about that. Cherubael slaughtered the last of the Janissaries as he ran into an obsidian-rimmed door. Ghoul's secrets were hidden in the spaces between spaces, as we plunged into another realm. I drew Barbarisator, holding it in my right hand, and grit my runestaff in my left. My pain medication was wearing off, and growing my hatred. We stepped forward and we saw it. The mausoleum under Ghoul. The scale of it etched at my sanity. Tiny, scattered specks of light, dozens of them, illuminated small parts of the face, of some impossible structures, as dark and cyclopean as the eternal wall ancient philosophers used to believe surrounded creation. The edge of the universe. The side of the casket an ancient god had wrought to keep in reality. This is where a king of demons was buried. This was where Pontius Glaw would find his universe-ending weapon. It unnerved me more that Cherubael seemed stunned. We began walking to the tomb center. It felt like hours, despite the fact our chronometers had stopped still. By whatever catalogue of means, Glaw had learned of this place, found it, and made his way inside to plunder its vile treasures. But his innermost secrets clearly still eluded him. That was why he had wanted the Malus Codicium so badly. We moved closer, enough that I could sense his putrid mind. In silence across the dust-laden floor we moved, coming into range of more janissaries. Using the smooth black stone as cover, we took them out systematically. We entered the tomb, a vault in which one might comfortably store a continent. The inner walls and the high, stone-beamed roof were lavishly decorated, with swirls of script and emblems that I swore I would never allow to be seen by other eyes. This was the crypt where Yisrael the Demon King lay in death, and the walls screamed his praise and worship. I could make out little of the dark gulf below, but there was something there, something the size of a great imperial hive city. I discerned a black, geometric shape that was fashioned from neither stone nor metal, nor even bone, but it seemed all of those things at once. It was repellent, dead but alive, dormant but filled with the slumbering power of 1,000,000 stars. The Barque of the Demon King, Yisrael's chariot of unholy battle, his instrument of apocalypse. I saw it with my own eyes, until Pontius Glaw emerged. His tall, gleaming machine body was as I had remembered. The cloak of blades clinked as he moved. I stared at his ever-smirking golden mask. "Gregor Eisenhorn," he said softly. "Magos Bure did a fine job, didn't he? Such a craftsman. I can never thank you enough for arranging his services. This is the hand I killed him with. The being who had taken so much from me. My mistake manifest. I tried to throw him off, mentioning his dead daughter, but a being like that only loved himself." He was about to say something else, but I had waited long enough. I blasted my will through the rune staff and lunged forward, swinging my blade. Cherubael lunged at him. The two locked like savage beasts, one of metal, the other of flesh. I lashed Ursars and heavy Seiya hets, with Barbarasator as I desperately poked at the inferno of violence before me. My psychic assaults were fueled by my body's pain. An equally hateful creature, a demon host of Glaw, came crashing into Cherubael, both tumbling out of sight as I stared down the metal Goliath before me. Glaw began laughing. He knew he was going to kill me. I drew on my rage. I was not the same man. He had taken too much from me. My sudden burst landed a hit, and I imagined wiped some sort of grin off. He returned with his own rage, unleashing a psychic assault fueled by a century of imprisonment. I bled from my nose and ears. I was hunched over, my hands on my thighs, panting like a dog. My head was swimming. I could hear him crunching over the onyx towards me. "You'd have won by now if you'd had that book," I said, coughing the blood up from my mouth. "The book. The damned book. The Malus Codicium. That's what you were really after when you sent your hired murderers against me. That's why you tore my operation apart and killed everyone you could reach. You wanted the book." "Of course I did," he snarled. I looked up at him. It would have unlocked the prize already. Done away with this endless, fruitless study. You'd simply opened the tomb and taken the demon's chariot. Long before we'd even got here. I'd have been mad to bring it with me. He froze as I lifted the tome from my coat pocket. "You foolish, foolish man," he said, smiling. I honored my vow and began to tear the pages and rip the book apart. Glaw screamed, jumping like a child and scrambling for the flying pages. For all that might, he had never looked so pathetic. I rose. I lifted Barbarasator in the air and thrust the blade into the stunned machine gold face. Arcane energies exploded from the wound, and the blade's runes made it vibrate uncontrollably. In the name of the holy god emperor of terror, I said, I call thee Diabolus, and here deliver thy sentence. My own blood was dripping off a Barbarisator's hilt. Between my double-handed grip, I raised the blade and made the Ul-Ka. The blade split his head and shattered the crystal into flecks of glass. Pontius Glaw, the man who in a different life could have been my friend, but in this one had been my greatest enemy, died. Cherubael came over to me, hovering. His kowtowed face looked sullen. His wounds began to heal from his vicious fight with the other demon host. You're not going to ask me to carry you, are you? Said Cherubael. I left the world of Ghoul, and I let the Imperium believe that Gregor Eisenhorn, Inquisitor of Ordo Xenos, never returned. Do you think me weak, flawed? Do you hate me for setting my inquisitorial role above the needs of others? If you hate me, I know this about you. You are no Inquisitor. You do not have the moral strength. I always think of the thousands, millions perhaps, who would die worse deaths but for my actions. Is that arrogance? Perhaps. And perhaps arrogance is therefore a virtue of the Inquisition. I would gladly ignore one life in agony if I could save 100, 1,000, more. Mankind must suffer so that mankind can survive. It is that simple. And my own suffering, and I would gladly suffer anything in the name of the God Emperor of mankind. My name is Gregor Eisenhorn. I am centuries old, long past my prime by Imperial standards, old by those of the Inquisition. All my life, I've had a reputation for being cold, unfeeling. Some have called me heartless, ruthless, even cruel. I am not, and I am. I am not beyond emotional response or compassion, but I possess, and my masters count this as perhaps my paramount virtue, a singular force of will. Throughout my career it has served me well to draw on this facility and to steel myself, unflinching, at all that which this wretched galaxy can throw at me. To feel pain or fear or grief is to allow myself a luxury I cannot afford. As a devoted member of His High Majesty the God Emperor's Inquisition, I find my philosophy bends towards that of a radical. To the outside galaxy, members of our orders appear much alike. An Inquisitor is an Inquisitor, a being of fear and persecution. It surprises many that internally we are riven with clashing ideologies. To express in simple terms, some Inquisitors are Puritans and some are radicals. Puritans believe in and enforce the traditional station of the Inquisition, working to purge our galactic community of any criminal or malevolent element, the triumvirate of evil, alien, mutant, and demon. Anything that clashes with the pure rule of mankind. The preachings of the Ministorum and the letter of imperial law is subject to a Puritan Inquisitor's attention. Hardline, traditional, merciless. That is a Puritan way. Radicals believe that any methods are allowable if they accomplish the inquisitorial task. I have embraced and used forbidden resources, such as the warp itself, as weapons against the enemies of mankind. As a great man Gideon Ravener had once said to me, I believe radicalism is inevitable. We all become radicals eventually, as we appreciate that we must know our enemy in order to defeat him. The real dangers come from extreme Puritans. Puritanism is fueled by ignorance, and ignorance is the greatest peril of all. That's not to suggest the path of the radical is easy. Eventually, even the most careful and most responsible radical will be overwhelmed by the warp. The real judge of character is what a good man can do for the Imperium before he is drawn too far. I have come to understand that time changes everything, and the line between light and dark is dimmer to old eyes. Are the people who lived in the past the same as those who live now? Am I the same? The past is a mirror to the future. or so a friend once said to me. I did not believe it then. I do now. The past walks with us. Its face is the face of all those we have hated, all we have loved, all we have failed. So you have me then, pictured. Gregor Eisenhorn, Inquisitor, radical, centuries old, an Inquisitor for years I can barely count. I am tall and broad at the shoulders, supported by surgical grafting to my ruined legs. Resolute. I have already told you of my force of will, and you will have noted my prowess with a blade. What else is there? I have triumphed over a corrupted House Glaw. I killed the radical Inquisitor Quixos. I have killed extremist diabolus heretic Pontius Glaw. Come, and let me show you how I will fight the King in Yellow.